I'm going to review the New Revised Standard Version, Catholic Edition, Second Edition, Journaling Bible. I found this Bible in the Ignatius catalog. I get a couple of them a year. The catalog said that this is something new, and I will admit that I've never seen it before. So I was intrigued enough to go ahead and buy it. I could tell by the information that was in the catalog that it wasn't a real large Bible. So maybe this might be a trial balloon to see if a journaling Bible will actually be popular amongst anybody that likes to buy Bibles. So I presume that their target audience is mostly Catholic. I am a Protestant, but I appreciate the Catholic versions of the Bible, and I enjoy studying them and reading them. This is the Ignatius Note-Taking Journaling Bible in the Revised Standard Version, Second Catholic Edition. I will point out some of the features that are on the back cover. It shows you the page layout, has some information there about what you can expect. A sample of the text, which is hard to see in a video just how small that is, but it does tell you that it's a 7-point text. That's pretty small, and I have a couple of Bibles with me that I'll use to compare with so you can sort of see the difference. 16 pages of color maps. I'll try to remember to show those to you. Smith-sewn binding. What that means is that you can have this thing recovered, and you can turn it into a pretty premium style Bible. So you could use it as it is until the cover starts to fall off. Maybe that'll never happen, but if it's used heavily, it probably will. And then you can have it rebound by a reputable rebinding service, and then you'll have a premium Bible. The synthetic leather cover has kind of a nice feel to it. It feels like leather. It's a material that is overlaid over a hardback cover. You could take it to church with you and set it on your lap and be able to take notes with it on it that way with that hard back. I have a journaling Bible, which I'll show you in a minute. I've had it redone with a leather cover, and I can take notes in it just fine with it on my lap. As you can see, this is just a pass-through sleeve, sort of keeps it in shape during shipping. You can also see that there's an elastic strap. It said so on the back that there's an elastic strap to hold it closed when it's not in use. You can take it or leave it. If you don't like it, cut it off or just leave it. Maybe wrap it around on the inside of the cover and take a look at it that way, or get rid of it if you don't like it. There's no ribbons on it, so if you want a ribbon, you have to add one. And the back has some sort of gold inlay where you can see on the back cover what it is. I suppose you could set it on a bookshelf and see by looking at the back what it is. So, without having to pull it out and open it up to see what it is. There's no fancy decorations on the cover. It does have a nice feel to it, so it's pleasant to hold. But like I say, it's just some sort of an overlay that's laid over the cover to enhance the experience of holding it. Nothing much on the inside cover. Some cardstock there. I'll mention this is the second edition of the Revised Standard Version, and this was updated after 2001 according to this Ligurium Authenticum, some sort of a standard that they were following in updating their edition. What I appreciate about it is that much of the research of biblical scholarship, especially textual scholarship and studying of the available manuscripts and study of trying to get back at the original text as much as possible. Much of that information that happened between, 1971, when the last edition of the Revised Standard Version was published, and this one, it says it was 2006. That might be right. All that research had an effect on these updates. So because of that, this the second edition of the Revised Standard Version, Catholic Edition, second edition, much of that research went into the preparation of this version, and it makes it a good study Bible. There's some information about about the Catholic edition of the New Revised Standard Version. Of the Revised Standard Version, Catholic edition. I'll point out here, if we can get to the table of contents, the Catholic order is followed in the Old Testament. So in a Protestant version of the Bible, the Apocrypha is in its own section, kind of altogether. The Revised Standard Version, the ones that contained the Apocrypha, those were also in their own order. But the Catholic canon has the order of the books are in a preferred Catholic order. So the book of Tobit, for example, follows the book of Nehemiah. It's also called Second Esdras. That's kind of interesting. That probably marks it off as, Ezra's first Esdras, Nehemiah's second Esdras, and then there's also an apocryphal third Esdras and an apocryphal fourth Esdras or fourth Ezra that are not part of the Catholic canon, and so they won't appear. They won't be in this edition here. But then Judith follows Tobit. Esther. There's some interesting features about Esther that's in a Catholic Bible, and also about the book of Daniel. Notice that there's the book of Baruch that follows Jeremiah and Lamentations. The book of Daniel is here, and it has some special features about it that I'll point out. All right, for the layout, what we have here is two-column layout with a pretty wide note-taking area. The note-taking area, each line does not match up with a line over in the text. So you might, since you have two columns and then one column for your own notes, you might find it rather difficult to reference text that's in the second column. So you might write a note here, for example, that applies to Numbers 25, verse 1. How would you mark it over here in the note-taking area to identify that this note applies to Numbers chapter 25, verse 1? You'll have to come up with a system for that. Now, what about the size of that font? We already have been notified that it's 7 point. Here is my New Revised Standard Version. This is out of print, so you'll have to look on eBay if you want one of these. This is by Oxford. This size font is 9 point. This is 7 point. 9 point is a lot easier on the eyes than 7 point is. However, I'll add that this creamy colored paper is easier on the eyes than this real bright colored white paper. So that might be a nice trade-off. But that's 9 point. It's designed for reading. You might have to have really good eyesight here or put in on a pair of reading glasses to see those if you have a little bit of older eyes. Here I have my New Revised Standard Version Oxford Edition Note-Taking Bible. There's a note taker's Bible here. See, note taker's Bible. Let's just compare this a little bit. See here, in the Oxford edition, when we're talking about just prose here, there is one column of text and one column area for your notes. So when you take notes in the note-taking area, you can be pretty sure just by the location that it applies to information in the text that's right next to it. Also, each line in the note-taking area corresponds to a line over in the text area. So they're not, it's not a different ruling over here than is over here. So it facilitates taking notes next to the text that the note applies to. That's a nice feature in the Oxford edition. And anytime you're shopping for a note-taking Bible, that might be something you ought to look at to see if there's only one column of text against your the note-taking area there in the Bible. This Bible's out of print too. It was a hardback, and I had it rebound by AA Leather. They did a pretty good job. But this video is not about this Bible or about AA Leather, so I'll go ahead and set that aside for now. So there's a personal challenge then about what to do, how to make notes over here and key them to text that's in the second column. However, this is the first that I know of ever of a Catholic edition of the Bible that is a note-taking Bible. And this particular Bible does have the potential to be used for a person's lifetime. It might wear out a little bit. The cover might pull apart from the text block, but you could have it rebound and turned into a premium Bible. And it could last you your whole life quite easily. So this would be an investment, something that you could take notes in and leave for your children and your grandchildren. However, if you do that, you may not want to write in cursive. But that's another story. That's a joke, actually. Our grandchildren may not be able to read cursive. All right, so I'm going to point out a couple of features about Catholic editions of the Bible. The Catholic editions of the Bible do like to incorporate some of the Apocrypha in the books that they're about or that they're additions to. So in the book of Esther, there is some of the Apocrypha from the Greek version of Esther that's worked right into the text. And in fact, here we go. It starts with chapter 11. All this text here is in italics. It's not in the standard square font here. It's italicized to indicate that this is an addition or something special about it, and that you probably ought to be looking in the footnotes to see why this stuff is italicized. Esther has several places in it where there are additions. Like here we have an addition, chapter 10, part of chapter 11, and the other part's way over there before chapter 1. It's in italics. So, just as you're studying on your own, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, as you're studying maybe the book of Esther, you will want to become familiarize yourself with what additions, what Apocrypha is included in the book of Esther in some editions of the Bible, particularly Catholic editions. Also, over in the book of Daniel, there's a couple other editions that I'll point out. When Nebuchadnezzar got really angry at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, those were the names of the three Jews when Nebuchadnezzar changed their names to Babylonian names. But they had Jewish names also. So he got mad at them because they would not bow down to that statue whenever music played, and so he threw them into a fiery furnace. And at that point, one of these three people, said a prayer, and it includes the prayer here. It's not in the Hebrew version of the book of Daniel, but it comes from the Greek version, and it's the prayer of Azariah. Azariah is the Jewish name of the person that said that prayer, and they just go ahead and insert it right here with information about what it's doing here and where it came from. So you obviously will want to read it with that information in mind if you're studying out of this edition, out of the Revised Standard Version, second edition of the Catholic version. I see that it's in italics, so it notifies you that there's something special about it, and that you probably ought to reference the footnotes to see what's so special about it. And what is special about it is that it's inserted here as an addition out of the Catholic Apocrypha. Here's the Song of the Three Jews, or the three young men here. That's also apocryphal. Then, if you've ever studied the book of Daniel, you know that there are 12 chapters in the book of Daniel, but not in the Catholic edition. The Catholic edition adds a little bit more information after chapter 12. It includes chapter 13. The book of Susanna is chapter 13. And I see that this is not italicized. There is an asterisk here, and hopefully that asterisk references a footnote that says that this information comes out of the Apocrypha. So there's a 13th chapter, and there's actually a 14th chapter also, Bel and the Dragon, chapter 14 of the book of Daniel. So if you're going to use Revised Standard Version, Second Catholic Edition to study the book of Daniel, you will become aware of these extra chapters and the extra text that's not in the standard Protestant edition of the book of Daniel. You will be aware of that, and you will draw your own conclusions about whether it belongs there or somewhere else. Another thing that's in this edition that's rather interesting, and again, if you're aware of it, you can be aware, you can make yourself aware of it, and then you just move on with your study. All translations have anomalies about them that you need to decide, is this a good translation or is it not a good translation? Should it be translated some other way? Did the translators have some sort of a bias? Well, this is a Catholic edition of the Revised Standard Version, and in some places it reads differently than the Revised Standard Version, or the New Revised Standard Version for that matter. And here's one of the big ones. This is Luke chapter 1, and in verse 28, Luke chapter 1, verse 28, when Gabriel comes and talks to Mary, he came to her and said, "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you." Full of grace comes from the Latin version of the Bible, and it's become really an important phrase amongst Catholics because they like to pray the rosary, and they'll say, "Hail Mary, full of grace." And so saying full of grace there is very important to many Catholics. The Revised Standard Version said favored one there instead of full of grace. And there are differences, and the meaning is different, and I'll leave that to your study. What's the difference between favored one and full of grace? I'm not going to draw judgments here. But over there in chapter 22 of Luke, this is also true, I believe, of Matthew and Mark, where Jesus institutes the Lord's Supper, and this is in the Second Catholic edition. You know, he took a cup, and he blessed it, and he passed it around to his disciples at the Last Supper and said, "Drink this and he gives the meaning of it. This is the blood that is poured out for the forgiveness of sins, or this is my blood, something along that line. Well, in this edition, it says, where is it? Here. And he took a chalice, not a cup, but a chalice. And when he had given thanks, he said, "Take this and divide it among yourselves, for I tell you from now on I shall not drink the fruit of the vine until the kingdom comes." And then again in verse 20, this chalice, or he likewise, this is after he did the bread part, he did the chalice thing again. That's actually follows a Jewish meal quite closely, where there's the cup and then bread, a breaking of the bread, and then there's the meal, and then at the end, I'm getting into study here, and anyway, the second time he takes the cup, he takes a chalice. It says, "This chalice is poured out for you. It's the new covenant in my blood." So there's a few little changes, and I think I've pretty much exhausted all of them right now, just telling you what the difference between the Catholic edition of a Revised Standard Version and the old-fashioned Revised Standard Version. So how would you think that the research that went into making of this version was a lot better, a lot more research went into this than was available for the New Revised Standard Version of 1989. However, New Revised Standard Version is being reviewed right now. At the back of this Bible, there's some more note-taking pages where you can take more notes. There's a pretty good number of them. It looks like a handful, 4 or 5 pages, 4 or 5 sheets. I guess that might be 8 or 10. I think I just counted 4, which would make 8 pages. And then there's some notes, or some pages of color maps. 16 it says on the cover. So here we go. These are obviously useful, and they get the job done when you want to reference a map. And then there's some cardstock in the back, and there's the back of the book. That pretty much covers it. That is the Revised Standard Version, Second Catholic Edition Journaling Bible. Very nice.